I like covering a pretty wide range of topics on this channel, and I often build a series out of my research into topics that I find particularly interesting. Last year I launched a series entitled Remote Viewing Predictions for the Future. In parts 1 and 2 I covered a fascinating experiment conducted by a remote viewer named Stephen A. Schwartz. In his experiment, which lasted from 1978 to 1996, over 40,000 participants were asked to remote view to the year 2050. Many of the future predictions made in that experiment have already come to fruition. In the comments section of part 1, it was brought to my attention that I hadn't really explained exactly what remote viewing is, so I began part 2 with a brief explanation. If you've not heard of remote viewing before, I would encourage you to pause the video here and watch at least the first few minutes of part 2. You can find the links to parts 1 and 2 in the description. So here in part 3, we'll be discussing the predictions surrounding a catastrophic event known as the killshot. These predictions share two important things in common with the predictions derived from Schwartz's experiment. First, specific predictions in both experiments were echoed by numerous participants. Second, several of the predictions have already come to pass in a manner eerily accurate to what participants described. Details from both sets of experiments were fairly consistent in many ways. While the unfulfilled predictions in both sets of experiments speak of a general upheaval and all kinds of natural disasters, there's a distinct difference in the feel of the future predicted by each. Despite the turmoil, one is left with a strong sense of hope about the future as described by Schwartz. This is in stark contrast to the decidedly bleak future we'll discuss in this video. Let's begin. The overseer of this particular remote viewing experiment is retired U.S. Army Major Ed Dames. During his military career, he served as the Training and Operations Officer for Project Stargate, the government's top-secret espionage program lasting from 1978 to 1995. Having been trained by the creator of remote viewing, a well-known psychic named Ingo Swann, many consider Dames to be among the world's foremost remote viewers. During Project Stargate, Dames and his subordinates were given the task of remote viewing the outcomes of various war-related events. While carrying out their assignments, they began picking up on other future events leading up to a devastating series of solar flares, which would have a dramatic impact to life on our planet. The series of flares are cumulatively what would come to be known as the killshot. Before going any deeper into the killshot itself, let's first examine the preceding sequence of events that, according to remote viewers, will give us a better idea of when to expect the killshot event. The first preceding event is the shot across the bow. This was a term used by Dames during a coast-to-coast interview hosted by Art Bell. In the broadcast, he told Bell that this would be a massive solar flare that would mark the beginning of the killshot sequence. Though this particular solar event would be greater than any other flare that had ever been recorded prior to then, it would still pale in comparison to the flares that would be observed during the final killshot event. It would only be a small taste of things to come. The broadcast aired Sunday, October 12, 2003. Chillingly, something quite interesting occurred a little over 2 weeks later. On November 4, 2003, the largest solar flare in recorded history would take place. Was it a coincidence? It's not completely outside the realm of possibility. However, during his next appearance on Coast to Coast, Dames declared that the November 4th flare was, in fact, the shot across the bow he had predicted. The next prediction would be a rust-like fungus that would mutate and pose a serious threat to wheat crops as well as potentially other types of grains and grasses. The mutation of this fungus would occur in Africa and then be spread throughout the rest of the world. This prediction was seemingly fulfilled in 2007.
Next tonight, fighting off a deadly threat to the world's wheat crop. Special correspondent Fred DeSam Lazaro has our report.
When the price of bread and other food staples goes up in the developing world, riots often result. What would happen if the majority of the world's wheat crop was wiped out by disease is unfathomable.
This is a susceptible variety, and actually the disease is eating the whole plant.
Scientists Peter Njau and Ruth Wanjera say a fungal disease thought long under control, called wheat rust, is back and could destroy 80% of all known wheat varieties if it isn't stopped in its tracks.
For UG99, we are getting it in areas about 3,000 meters above sea level.
The wheat stem rust was first discovered several hundred miles west of here in Uganda. Stem rust will spread further east into the populous Asian subcontinent and later to China. It blew very quickly into the farmlands here in Kenya's Rift Valley and thereafter east, across the Red Sea into Yemen and as far east today as Iran. In Kenya, wheat rust has been devastating for the subsistence farmers who use a few of their acres to grow the crop and earn some extra income.
Without the fungicides, there would be no wheat. Our fear is that the rusts will build up resistance to the sprays faster than we can have new sprays for them.
Thousands of miles away in Minnesota, Brian Stephenson and colleagues are trying to find a solution.
You're going to introduce the desired resistance gene, but you're also going to introduce some other deleterious genes that may reduce the yield, they may reduce the bread-making quality, and other aspects as well.
Wheat rust was thought to be under control in the 1950s, but instead it was quietly mutating to cause the new threat. Back in Kenya, Peter Njau says about 10% of the experimental new varieties are showing good resistance to stem rust, but that's just the first step.
There is still a number of stages to go. You need, after that, to do adaptation trials, seed multiplication, and seed distribution to the farmers.
You still need to spray them.
We have to spray them, and we still are very, very dependent on the plant breeders to try and genetically produce something that is resistant to that.
Scientists here say it may take until 2016 before they could send resistant wheat strains to meet most farmers' needs. As they race to genetically outfox stem rust, it will be a game of hoping, praying, and spraying.
The next prediction in the sequence was a double blow of sorts, in which a natural disaster would end up causing a nuclear disaster. The prediction was that a massive earthquake would occur in Japan. The quake would be so severe that a nuclear reactor would be destroyed. In its wake, a vast area of land would be so badly irradiated, Dames likened it unto, quote, at least a mini Chernobyl, end quote. On a side note that I find particularly interesting, he made a point of mentioning that Tokyo would be left relatively unharmed. The Japanese authorities were made aware of this prediction. However, they were not concerned, as they believed their double containment reactors would be able to withstand almost anything nature could throw at it. As Japan is quite prone to earthquakes, their reactors were designed to weather such inevitabilities. Specifically, the reactors were designed to withstand a quake as high as 7.8 on the Richter scale, which, if you know anything about the Richter scale, is a pretty honkin' big earthquake. But on March 11th, 2011, this nightmare scenario came to pass.
This is Martin Fackler for the New York Times. I'm the Tokyo Bureau Chief. Japan suffered its largest earthquake on historical record today. An 8.8 magnitude earthquake hit off the northern coast. The quake itself did damage, but even more devastating was the tsunami that the quake unleashed. In some places, there were news reports of a wave more than 25 feet high that swept through entire towns, bulldozing through buildings and sweeping over cars as they were driving down a highway. The areas that were hit, many of them are very remote, and at this time it looks like there are at least 200, probably many more deaths, hundreds more missing. Entire swaths of northern Japan are now without power. Up near where the earthquake hit, the largest city in that area is a city called Sendai. The airport there was hit by the tsunami. The runway was covered with water and the airport terminal was cut off. And inside of it, more than 1,000 travelers were stranded. One of the most disturbing news reports we've had is of a nuclear power plant in northern Japan where the cooling system has failed. And this has prompted the government to declare a nuclear emergency. People have been evacuated from within a 2-mile radius of the plant.
Naturally, Dames counted this as being just one more prediction in a growing list of ones checkmarked as accurate. Even his point about Tokyo being okay turned out to be pretty correct. On the other hand, a skeptic wouldn't necessarily be wrong to suggest that this just might be a prime example of Murphy's Law. Even more than that, one could argue that this event was bound to happen at some point or another. Do these 3 examples give any credence to the predictions relating to the killshot sequence? Perhaps. After all, one can't deny the simple fact that these events did in fact happen. So the question becomes, do each of these events truly represent the fulfillment of a prediction? Any conclusion on the matter is yours, and yours alone to make. Now that we've covered the predictions that have come to pass, I figured this would be a good place to end part 3 and pick up on part 4 with the predictions that have not yet come to pass. Also in part 4, I'm not sure if I will get to all of this, but I would like to cover a few other talking points pertaining to Ed Dames and his killshot predictions, as well as looking into the map of safe zones that he has predicted. So not sure if we'll get to that particularly in part 4, but I will get to that at some point. Also, thank y'all so much for bearing with me. Just today, actually I just got back home from the service of the gentleman that I was caring for, and it was truly a beautiful service. And many of you in my last video gave your condolences, and that really meant so much to me, so I wanted to thank you for that. Now, as I said, part 4 will be my next video, but after that I thought it would be fun to let you decide what my next project will be. And I have 3 options here. Okay. Option A is Tall Whites, Photographic Evidence Part 3. Option B, Are Aliens Demons Part 1. Now, I gotta be honest, when I first proposed this as an idea for a series, I couldn't believe the level of interest that y'all had in this, so definitely going to take that on. Option C, The M Cave Mystery Part 6. So, vote below. Hey everyone, Drew here from Mad Cat Mysteries, and I hope you enjoyed the video you just watched. If you did, you can click on the subscribe button below. I'd appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.